Hi, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for those who are watching live at home, and thank you for those who are watching the recording. That's going to be posted on the PVA website later this week. Um, this is Road to College number 3 about finances and discussing all about financial aid. An intro because it's a pretty big topic and there's a lot of information there. So tonight we're going to have Mr. Darnell Edwards. He's our college readiness specialist that works with PVA. He's going to be talking to you about financial aid. He works with our current seniors and he has one-on-one meetings with them. He helps them with applications, with college questions, with financial aid, all of the above. But he also works with our rising seniors. So he is going to be around this spring and summer and fall to help out our seniors as they go into senior year. And he's going to be working with both Miss Johnson and I in Capstone and Miss Landry to communicate everything. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Mr. Edwards present. And at the end, we will be taking some Q&A. So, okay, thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Ms. Ferris. All right. Again, my name is Mr. Edwards, and we're going to have the talk tonight. Let's talk about finances, financial aid, and college affordability. The earlier you can have this conversation, whether it's at dinner, in the car, the easier it'll be once you get to actually doing the application itself, because I'm in the business of saving money. And if you're willing to join me, let's go ahead and kind of jump in and learn some of the terminology, the processes now, so it'll save us some time and money at the very end. So with that said, don't let the price tag scare you, regardless of your college list and where you're choosing to go. If you're going to a more expensive college, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to that you're going to more debt. There are ways that you can get your college paid for if you do the research early, you ask the right questions, and make sure the process is done efficiently. So let's go to the next slide, Travis. All right, so first thing is application opens October 1st. That's important because it is first come, first served basis. I always recommend, as you're getting your taxes done, you should have already done that. If you've got an extension, that's fine. But if you filed electronically, once the FAFSA, the TASFA, and the CSS profile opens in October 1st, it's always a good idea to just knock that out. You don't want to wait for that. And let's go to the next slide. Basic terminology, we've all heard acronyms and some of the terms, so let's go over it real quick. Financial aid refers to just money that your student will receive to pay for college, be it scholarships. That's money awarded by corporations, individuals. It could be need-based, based on income, or academic merit-based. A lot of our students at HSPVA, they'll earn merit-based scholarships based on portfolios, auditions, or whatnot, but also academics and test scores as well. There's 2 types of loans, actually 3. Here we'll reference the subsidized and unsubsidized. The major difference is subsidized, the government is going to pay for the interest while the student is in school. Unsub, the interest will accrue and you won't pay for both until after 6 months after graduation, but you'll have to pay for the interest. Verification, there are some students that might be what's called flagged for verification. We'll dive deeper into that a little later. If the institution finds that something has been reported inaccurately, let's just say you've submitted your taxes, but the numbers don't add up, they may ask for additional documentation to take care of that before you can register for classes, before they can award your students. And so we want to make sure that we're providing detailed documentation, and it is easier to use what's called the data retrieval tool through the IRS to just have the information pulled over to FAFSA. It saves a lot of time, and most often you're not going to be flagged for verification. The last term that I'll cover tonight is a work study. As you're applying for FAFSA, there are certain students that are perhaps low income. If you see a question asking if you're interested in work study, always select yes, because it is a part-time job, part-time employment. The institution will pay you to basically study, and you can use the money towards educational expenses or towards your personal stuff, going to the movies, filling up your car, whatever, so that's always a good option. Next slide, Travis. All right, so let's kind of dive deeper a little bit, and let's look at what makes up the actual sticker price of college affordability. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so you have tuition and fees. That's pretty standard. you can start to visit websites of schools that you're considering now, and you can already find out what those numbers are. You will see this actual number on the student bill. So tuition and fees typically doesn't change. Some institutions will raise or increase tuition and fees. So with that said, you want to prepare for that. Books and supplies will vary. Simple advice for that: rent your textbooks. Unless you're planning to keep it, you're going to med school, you're becoming a lawyer or whatnot, you can keep it, but rent your textbooks. It costs a fraction of the cost to buy them outright. Room and board is basically you're living on campus, you're paying for meals, personal and transportation. That's going to vary as well depending on where you go to college, having to come back home during the holidays or whatnot. So tuition and fees, again, is standard. The last, and room and board, standard. The other two will kind of vary. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So cost of attendance, what makes it up? The direct cost, again, like I said, tuition and fees, room and board. This is what you will see on the student account. It is standard. You can check the website of the schools you're considering now and get those numbers. Indirect cost is going to be variable. Books and supplies, travel, miscellaneous, personal expenses. When you add all of that up, that's what the cost of attendance is. Next slide. So here's just a preview of the difference in costs if you're staying in state, going to a public school versus out of state and a private school. As you can see, a private school does cost more, but depending on the endowment, the types of scholarships offered, I have seen some students get more financial aid awarded for going out of state or even going to a private school than staying in state and going to a local school. It just depends on what you qualify for. So don't let the numbers scare you. Let's go to the next slide. And then some examples of some Houston area colleges. Here's some numbers just based on cost as well. Next slide. All right. So real quick, hopefully, you know how to apply for financial aid. If you could answer the question, are there multiple types of applications? When should you apply? If you don't know, we're going to go into that right now. Next slide. All right. So types of financial aid, again, scholarships, merit-based, need-based. The grants also merit-based and need-based. A lot of college institutions give financial aid in the forms of grants and scholarships. Students always ask me, Mr. Edwards, how do I research scholarships? Now, there are independent sites that I'll list later on, but the easiest way to get a scholarship is to apply to the university. You're going to get most of your college paid for by the actual institution. The more competitive you are, the more research you do early on, there are ways to get everything paid for, or at least a fraction of the cost. Again, there's work study and then loans that must be paid back as well with interest. There was one last loan that I did not include in the slide, and that's the Parent Plus loan. That's a federal loan as well. Students that are offered financial aid and there's still a gap will be offered a Parent Plus loan. It's the only loan that the parent has to sign off on, and they run your credit and you have to qualify for that loan. So that is an additional loan that you can research on your own. Okay, next slide. Benefits of applying for financial aid. There's a lot of myths about it. Some folks think that if I make too much, I won't qualify for things. But as you're applying for financial aid, you'll know instantly if you qualify for like Pell Grant, for example. The max, a little bit under $6,500. There are scholarships offered by the university. It does not matter if you are in need of the scholarship based on your income level, but some scholarships do require a financial aid application, whether it's the FAFSA, the TASFA, or the CSS profile. Same thing with grants, which is why we always recommend everyone do the application. If the pandemic and this recent winter storm taught us anything, it is that life can change in an instant, in the blink of an eye. So last year's income may be totally different than this year's income, just based on whatever disruption has happened to businesses, to your finances. And we've had students in the past that chose not to fill out a financial aid form. They had their income disrupted and they weren't able to get financial aid. But those that had one on file, just out of caution, they were able to have that conversation with a financial aid counselor at the school. And a lot of folks don't know this, but financial aid counselors at schools, they can use what's called personal judgment. So if there's a change in financial status based on what you reported initially on your financial aid application, if there's been a change, you can provide documentation and they can still award you financial aid just based on that change. So with that said, everyone needs to go ahead and do that. And that's a perfect segue into something new that's coming down the pike called HB3. It's House Bill number 3. It was recently passed by the Texas Education Agency. So there's going to be a new graduation requirement. Just hold your breath here. Breathe. New graduation requirement. Every student will be required to complete a financial aid application. And the only way that you'll be able to basically not have to do that is apply for a waiver. The TEA has passed it. HISD, we're still receiving information about it. I don't want to go into too much detail about it because we are sort of at the beginning stages of the rollout. And during the summer, each principal, each school will receive detailed information on the waiver form that you can fill out if you're choosing not to apply for financial aid. But other than that, it will be a graduation requirement starting with class 2022. All right. So having said all of that, here are some things that I recommend you do starting now. As you're getting ready to apply for financial aid October 1st, start to gather your information, all your tax stuff. If you filed electronically, parents, fantastic. You can use the data retrieval tool. It'll save you time. Okay. Determine dependency status. This is going to be important because depending on your dependency status, whether you're independent or dependent, that will also determine which parent has to provide the financial aid information, and so on and so forth. And I'll go into that in detail in just a moment. You want to create an FSA ID. That is going to be your login credentials to not only fill out the FAFSA, it's going to be used every year that you reapply for financial aid. And you can actually do that now by simply going to the studentaid.gov website and click create FAFSA, create FSA ID. One parent and a student has to create their individual FSA ID. And again, you'll use that each year. So make sure you take a screenshot, save it, because it'll be reused. Okay. You'll review your student aid report. Once it's submitted, the student aid report covers everything that's been submitted, including the college list. And lastly, verification steps and updates. So after you submit everything, you'll receive a confirmation email with the student aid report. It'll have important information that you'll want to keep as you are contacting your schools and sort of comparing and contrasting who's offering you what. All right, next slide. Okay, so 3 types of financial aid. FAFSA is straightforward. U.S. citizens, permanent residents, refugees, and those with visas can fill out that particular application. TASFA is for Texas residents who's been in the state 3 years or more, graduating from a Texas public private school, or one that is a temporary resident. Mainly you're an undocumented student. So TASFA students, you're not eligible for federal aid, but you can still qualify for institutional grants and institutional scholarships as well, especially in Texas. All right. It's important if you're a TASFA student, undocumented, you want to start to research schools that support what we call Dreamers, that is undocumented students. And there are tons of them. As a matter of fact, our district, we send scholarship information on a monthly basis for undocumented students. So as you're matriculating, you become a senior, you'll start to see a bunch of emails from me monthly with scholarship information, whether you are a U.S. citizen or non-citizen. The last one is a CSS profile. It is basically for non-federal aid, and about 400 or so schools participate in it. For example, Rice University is one of them, Baylor is another. A lot of PVA students will have to do the CSS profile, especially those that are applying to your conservatories, private schools. There are also public schools on there, but there's a list of them on through College Board. And there's a cost to this particular financial aid application. It's $25 for the initial application, and then $16 for each additional report. But if you qualify for a fee waiver, you can check with me or Ms. Ferris or Ms. Johnson, and we can let you know if you qualify to get those fees waived. Next slide. Okay, so dependency status, real simple. If you live with your biological parent or legal guardian, you are considered dependent. And in terms of reporting on the financial aid application, I get all kind of scenarios thrown at me by families. So let's just say parents are divorced. Whoever's supporting you more than 50%, that is the person that has to report income. That is for FAFSA, okay? CSS profile is totally different. They want information from everyone, biological parents. If one parent has been remarried, that step parent has to provide information as well. If you are considered independent, you are married, you have a child, and you're providing over 50% of the income expenses, 24 years of age, unaccompanied homeless minor, and I'll go into that in detail in just a moment, or in the military, you're considered independent if you meet one of those criteria. Next slide. All right, just various scenarios. I'm not going to go through all of them. The main thing you need to know is if you're filling out the FAFSA again, if you're living with biological parents, both have to, they have to include their income in the FAFSA, okay? If you're living with one, if they're divorced, whoever's supporting you the most, 50% or more, has to report, okay? And then there's other scenarios in here that I won't go into. This entire deck is going to be on the website, so you can visit it later and kind of look at the details. But all right, let's keep going. Unaccompanied homeless youth. We do have some students that we support in the district that are considered what we call a McKinney-Vento or unaccompanied youth. Let's just say a student is no longer living with biological parents, and for whatever reason, it could be a conflict at home, or the child is emancipated and they're living with a family member, grandparents. In this case, you want to notify your counselor because you might be able to claim independent if that is the case. There are some tax details that will need to be covered, but you will be considered independent possibly if this is your scenario. Just make sure to reach out to your counselor and we can talk about that in detail. Next slide. All right, so here's some documents that you want to keep on hand as you're filling out your CSS profile, any other of the financial aid applications, your W-2 form, 1040 tax return form as well. It'll make the process easier as you're filling it out. The data retrieval tool is going to be your best friend though. So for those that are filed electronically, we can just pull that information from the IRS. Next slide. Just some more details about the free application for federal student aid, that is the FAFSA. If you're ever charged, besides CSS profile, for filling out a financial aid application, it is a scam. Do not do it, okay? It is free of charge. That is TASFA, and the FAFSA opens October 1st. Just some things that you might want to have on hand: parents and student social security number, or your permanent resident card if applicable, date of birth, 2019 student and parents tax information. And just know that if you are a male student, you do have to sign up for selective service. That is basically enlisting in the military if it comes down to it. You will not be able to qualify for financial aid if you do not select that you are signing up for selective service. It is mandatory. All right, next slide. Creating an FSA ID, you can do that now. Here's some basic slides on what that looks like. The parent and one parent and the student will have to do that. It is your login credentials each year as you are progressing through college. You'll even use it for grad school. Next slide. The TASPA, it mirrors the FAFSA. The main difference is it's a paper form. Now there are a few colleges in the state that does have electronic forms, like University of Houston. They have like a PDF that you can fill out. The major difference is if your parents is not working, or if they have not filed taxes before, you'll have to get what's called an IRS non-filer letter. And you can do that by visiting the local tax office and requesting that document. And with that, you'll have to send the documentation to each college that you apply to across the country, along with the TASPA. If you're staying in Texas, you'll submit the paper form along with your non-filer letter and all the other documents that come along with it. Next slide. CSS profile, again, is a bit different than FAFSA. It is for non-federal aid, and participating colleges you can find on College Board. I'm assuming that pretty much all students have set up a College Board account. That is the same website that you go on to register for SAT. You can go ahead now, if you'd like, and start to look at those colleges to see if they're on your list. If they are, then you're going to have to submit a CSS profile. Next slide. So in terms of finding out how much your parent or your family is going to have to pay, just a couple of recommendations. You can use what's called a net price calculator. Each institution has a net price calculator. You can type in basic information about your income, household size, your GPA, a test score if you're submitting a test score, and it'll give you an estimate of what you're going to pay. Really cool tool. Just use it now while there's low risk. All right. And then at the very end, there's the FAFSA forecaster. You can do a preliminary financial aid application without submitting it. And you can also find out what you'll actually qualify. If you'll qualify for Pell Grants, some of the Texas grants, you can do that by visiting the website there. This will be made available on the school's website later. Next slide. All right, so once you've submitted everything, the very next step is to just verify that everything has been submitted on time, that it's accurate. You want to review your student aid report and look for what's called an EFC. That's the estimated family contribution. I believe the next slide will have a picture of what that looks like. And that number is not what your family will pay, but it will determine if you qualify for free money, like the federal Pell Grant, the Texas state grants or whatnot. So the closer that number is to 0, the better chance you have of qualifying for the free aid. Okay, you want to follow up with each institution to make sure all documents are submitted. Apply for independent scholarships. You can start to do that now. As a matter of fact, there are a few that I'm going to send out tomorrow. So just make sure you're checking your email or whatnot. And I want to put a plug in. I mean, a lot of the juniors have seen emails and texts from me about the junior survey. Go ahead and fill that out, because you'll opt into text messaging. I send a lot of scholarship information and important college stuff via text. So you just fill out the junior survey. That'll help me to stay in contact with you and for you to keep up to date with all the great things that's happening and free stuff that's that you can be awarded. And then you'll want to wait for your financial aid award letter. And as you're compiling all of that, what I tell my students to do is you don't have to make a rash decision. You always want to consider who's offering you the most money. And at the very end, we can go through what's called a financial aid appeals process. I've been able to support some students to ask for more money if it's not enough of what you need to pay for college. All right, next slide. Additional terminology that we'll kind of touch on right now. Next slide. Verification. So quick statistic, 50 to 70% of our students are verified and don't have to provide additional information to the institution, but there are some select students that are flagged for verification. If that is the case, then you'll have to request your tax transcript from the IRS. Various ways to do that. You can visit a local office. You can go online to IRS and request it, and basically just download the PDF. you'll send it to the school, and you just want to stay on top of that, because without follow-up, you won't get awarded any aid. Okay. Next slide. Again, the estimated family contribution, once you've completed your FAFSA, at the very end, this picture is your student aid report, and highlighted is the number that you'll want to look for to determine if you're going to qualify for free money. All right, next slide. Okay, ordering tax transcripts. Again, you can go to IRS website, get your tax transcript, and this is the picture on the right. That's what it looks like. It'll just detail all of your finance information and what's been reported to the IRS. That is the document that you'll want to submit to the institutions. Next slide. Next slide. For Dreamers, again, we send tons of scholarship information. Do not worry about, I can't tell you not to worry about paying for college. Of course, that comes along with the territory, but we will do everything in our power, all the information that we receive, to make sure that you still get the finances that you need to pay for college without going into major debt as well. We send out what's called hot scholarships on a monthly basis, and I'm sure y'all are overwhelmed with all the information I send out, but it's there for you. The more you apply for it, the better chance you'll have of getting those scholarships. But the best way to apply and get a scholarship is to apply to the university itself. Next slide. Here's some helpful resources that I like to highlight to students as you are looking into financial aid information, FAFSA through the district. The college readiness site has scholarship information. College for All Texans is amazing. It covers the Texas grants, the amounts. It goes over just details on each application and tips to make sure you're supplying accurate information. Studentaid.gov, you can visit that website to set up your FSA ID, and that's the website to complete the FAFSA. College Board, of course, it's going to be for CSS Profile. Apply Texas, you'll use that to apply for college, as well as Common App. And TexasOnCourse.org is really cool because it has various modules on a lot of college admissions topics. And so you can start to read up on what's going on, stay abreast on what's going on. And you can also take practice quizzes just to test your knowledge after you've read articles. It's really cool. Next slide. And then here are some scholarships, websites, and some resources that I typically highlight to students and parents. College Greenlight is really cool. They also offer free fly-ins to various schools across the country. Unigo, KEPIX, Naviance, of course, the individual college website, and then Scully is an app. It tracks tons of ways to get free money as well. Next slide. So just some homework for you. Create the FSA ID as soon as you can. Request your IRS text transcript. So once October 1st comes around, you're ready to go. You have your documents in place, and you can start to apply early. All right. I do want to reiterate something that Ms. Ferris stated at the beginning. We will have another financial aid night in the fall, and at that time, we typically have a guest from Rice University as well as U of H. They'll do a deeper dive into the CSS Profile, FAFSA, and TASFA. So by the time that we're ready to start filling out applications, we'll have the experts come and talk about details at that point. Next slide. All right, I rattled off a lot of information. I'm sure we have some questions, so we'll take time to go ahead and address those now. All right, Ms. Ferris, do you see any questions?
Not just yet. I think a lot of people are taking it all in.
Yeah.
I think the questions are probably going to roll in more once October 1st opens the FAFSA window. So this is going to be recorded and put on the website with the other Road to College presentations for the juniors. And like Mr. Edwards said, we are going to go over this again in the fall. We just wanted to give you a brief overview. I know it didn't seem brief, but it is in the world of financial aid. So we wanted to give you that. And I think we are also going to post the PowerPoint so that they can utilize the websites for the scholarships and look at those resources. So I'm going to give it another minute to see if there are any questions posted.
And also, feel free to email me if you'd like to set up a meeting. It's never too early. I mean, of course, we have our seniors just get ready to graduate, but I am totally open to having a conversation with you about financial aid and college stuff now as we're going into the summer.
Okay, I don't see any questions posted right now, but as Mr. Edwards said, you can email any of us at any time. I know in the fall there's going to be a lot more, so we'll have those experts from Rice and U of H, and we'll have it again. And Mr. Edwards will also be able to work with the students in Capstone to talk about financial aid when they're in the midst of it. So, okay, well, thank you so much, Mr. Edwards, for presenting. This was great, and everyone have a wonderful night.